This
our
conference will
guest
now be
speakers
recorded.
who are, high volume phakic lens surgeons. And just for our guest speakers, on behalf of Mirsa, I welcome both of you. Uh, just to give you a little brief, MIRSA is Mumbai Young Refractive Surgeons Association, which is a small group which we have just recently started. It is basically to connect all the young, refractive surgeons of Bombay in helping out each other and organizing these sort of webinars and discussing challenging cases. So, welcome everyone, and without wasting much time, I'll hand it over to our moderator for today, Dr. Sumit Lane, who's a dear friend of mine. Dr. Sumit, you can take it from here.
Thank you, Zain, and thank you, Neeraj, for forming this group and doing lot of activities which are interesting and also give us the opportunity to meet each other. Our first speaker for today is Dr. Neeta Sharma. As Ma'am does not need any introduction, everyone knows she is a senior practitioner from Mumbai, practicing since 1991. That completes her 30 years now. She is an alumni from the CS KJ Somaya and also Hindu Sabha Hospital. She has a keen interest in the refractive surgery and she is a surgeon par excellence. It's a privilege and great opportunity for all our young refractive surgeons to learn from her and to have her on this platform and have a discussion one-to-one with her. We thank you, ma'am, from Mirza for providing your time to us and over to you, ma'am, for your presence.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Sunil. Yes. Is my voice visible, audible?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
And is the screen visible?
Yes, ma'am. It's not full screen. You
Yeah,
can
I'll
go
make
for.
it full. I'll make it full screen. This is coming in the way, so this.
Directly slideshow you can put on.
Yeah, so that area where I can click on slideshow is hidden by everybody's faces.
Oh,
I think I'll make it small. Yeah, now I've got it. Yeah, now is it full screen?
yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody, and thank you to the Mumbai Young Refractive Surgeons to call me to give this talk. And since I'm the first speaker, I will just give a little bit of an introduction about why we are looking at this talk and why we do these type of surgeries before I proceed to doing the actual part of my talk, which is trying to compare a little bit between the phakic lens from the care group and the phakic lens from the STAR group. So generally the patients who come to us are, we don't want to wear glasses and we cannot tolerate lenses. And the options that we have with us is a laser vision correction in the form of PRK or LASIK, intrastromal corneal implants and phakic lenses, and lastly, clear lens extraction of prelex. So these are the patients who are generally very demanding, who want immediate restoration of vision, fantastic visual quality, and no dependence on spectacles. So why would we think about phakic lenses at all? Because one, it is painless. It's a very short surgery with quick recovery and immediate restoration of vision. No rejections, no maintenance. Very, very important point for all of us, it is reversible. And the treatment rate is very, very low. And generally the visual quality which is imparted, especially in the higher powers, is excellent. We need to be selective about who we take. I generally look at 21 years and above with a stable refraction, and also patients who, for various reasons, are not suitable for a laser vision correction. For me, 2.8 mm AC depth from the endothelium is mandatory. We need to see that the angles are open and the patient has a good endothelial count without any other comorbidities in the eye. These are, of course, the contraindications where we would not to do. I would just talk about the important ones, cases of glaucoma. cases where the depth is very poor, the AC depth, or where the patient is too young and the angles are also not very open. Once we have seen that this patient is okay to go ahead with the phakic lens, we would go through a thorough ocular examination. The only points I would highlight on here is an examination of the angle again, a slit lamp examination, the examination of the lens, because very often very high myopes have some amount of lenticular changes, which if we don't look into and warn them, would be labeled to the lens that we have put in and not something which was pre-existing. Measurements that are needed to proceed for this surgery would be measurements with the help of the IOLMaster or the Pentacam or a similar device for the anterior chamber depth, the white to white, the keratometry readings that we get from it, and of course a specular microscopy and a gonioscopy is mandatory in these cases. At our center, now what we use is the IOLMaster 700. And for all cases, we use the Varian image guided system. Even if they're not for toric, it helps us in seeing that our incision is bang at the point that we would wish it to be. A Pentacam examination is mandatory to see that we are not missing out anything in the posterior cornea in these patients, and it corroborates the findings that we have got with the other equipment. In the IOLMaster reading, we would be looking at the case that it gives, the white to white which it gives. Generally, the IOLMaster 700 overshoots the white to white by anything between 0.34 to 0.5 from what it is actually. We have always used these type of markers. I used to use the slit lamp for marking before I had the Varian, and I used to use it even to mark the 0 and 180 in the patients of phakic lens, even if they were non-toric. And of course, it was mandatory in case of the toric phakic lens. This is how the image would come, and this is how we would know what to do if we use the Varian system. This is a part on which I want to take a minute extra and talk on, because we can take the white to white from the IOLMaster, we can take it from the OBSCAN. What I depend on is the caliper. Need to be very careful in case of pigmented limbus, in case of presence of pterygium. But if it is done with the help of paraffin drops, with the patient supine under the microscope, with the normal vernier caliper, once I have taken the white to white with the vernier caliper, seeing to it that I don't go to the limbus, I remain on clear cornea, I stain the tip of the caliper with the marker pen and mark it on a blank white paper and take multiple such readings. Then with the help of the vernier caliper, I take the measurement of the 2 dots that I have marked. 3 readings is what I generally take. And this gives me a very accurate measurement without the help of sophisticated equipment when I do these cases. This is extremely important so that our sizing is perfect, which is the crux to the treatment with a phakic lens. Importance being that we need to be between half corneal thickness to 1.5 corneal thickness, that is 0.250 to 0.750 mm. If we are less, there are chances of anterior capsular opacification and cataract. If we are more, there are chances of crowding of the angle and glaucoma. Precision is a lot of little things which we do right. Once we are set and the lens is ordered, things are much simpler to follow. Now we come to the important part of my talk, which is a phakic lens comparison, whatever I can between the CARE group and the STAR group. The IPCL is a single piece posterior chamber phakic lens going through an incision which is 2.8 millimeters. It has a very wide power range from +15 to -30, and the astigmatism correction that we can do is for cylinders up to 8 diopters. It's a hybrid acrylic material which they refuse to reveal, and a vegetarian source. It has 2 dots, which 2 holes in the optic, which are kept on the superior part, which is below the lid, and that prevents from any glares happening, and this allows a free flow of aqueous. And now with the central hole also, we can avoid a YAG PI in most of the cases that we are doing surgery on nowadays. we'll just see a short video about how we load it. It is very important that we first fill up the cartridge with simple saline, and then with a very little bit amount of uh, methyl cellulose, check the orientation of the holes of the lens. And then very good thing about this lens is that the handling, the folding, the loading of the lens is very similar to the other lenses which we use and does not need too much of extra expertise. As we come out, we don't inject out fully till we are sure that our orientation of the lens is correct, because if we are out halfway through, we can still retract it back and redo the thing if we find that inadvertently we've not loaded it correctly. And then we see that we tuck in the haptics of the lens without crossing the optic as far as possible, and see that all the haptics are going below the iris. Methyl cellulose is preferred because it is easy to remove and it does not remain in the eye too much. We can use the help of another instrument if we need help in tucking the lens in, the blunt, simple instrument. This is a toric lens, so you can see the marks which are visible, with which we can see that we orient it properly where we need to orient the lens. In case of the care group, it is always 0-180, where our incision is and where the lens is also to be oriented. And of course, the most important step, removal of all the viscoelastic, which nowadays with the central hole is much easier. With the bimanual IA, I find it quite easy so that the fluid goes from one hole and it comes out to the other hole. Here again, we can see the two marks which are for the toric lens, which tell us. Some of these young people squeeze a lot, and then I put in a small air bubble to put in if I'm doing it under topical anesthesia and I find that the patient is not that greatly cooperative when I go on with the surgery, and there are chances of them squeezing it out. Post-op medication is as per our cataract surgery, as per our preference, but I do see to it that all the patients are on Diamox for a couple of days. This is a well-aligned toric IPCL. You can see that the marks are along with the marks which are visible here. This is the phakic lens from the STAR group. There, the haptic hole on the leading haptic is on the right side. The material is different. It's a collamer, a collagen, and a hemapolymer mixture. It's a beautiful material, extremely biocompatible. It is hydrophilic, and refractive index is 1.45. The folding is very gentle. The lens is very smooth and easy. It has various models for the myopic as well as the hyperopic lenses. And the marking is very important, where we have the alignment marks for the toric lenses and also to show where this can be done. It comes in a bottle with fluid. Very important that we have the sponge tip plunger with which we can take out the lens, and we wet the foam tip plunger, and then it is put back into its holder, and then it is fitted onto the injector base first. Keeping the plunger and holder in place, the injector cap is advanced until the ball end of the plunger interlocks with the injector. A click can be felt and heard when it is fit properly. This is extremely important. And then it is retracted. The foam tip plunger will remain locked, and the holder is removed by sliding it out. I have shown this in pictures because I don't have a video showing this, but this needs to be ensured before we start the surgery. And then the lens which is loaded is fitted into this and locked into place. The loading I will show in the video. It's very important to check the lens which we have loaded. As you can see here, it is poorly loaded, which can have problems once we are in the chamber. We can redo the whole procedure before we enter the eye in case we see a case like this. Otherwise, if it is properly loaded, we proceed with the surgery. Again, here we fill a mixture of saline with a very little amount of viscoelastic, which is put in, not to overfill with viscoelastic. And the lens is taken out from the bottle with the foam tip plunger, and It's handled very delicately without use of any other instruments, and it is slid on to the cartridge, and very gently it can be folded onto the cartridge with the help of the foam tip plunger. Seeing that some amount of it is out and see that both the sides are equal, it is totally horizontal without a tilt. There is a grasping forceps which is there. Here, if you see, I have kept a finger there in case it retracts. When the forceps goes out to hold on to the lens. Now, if you see the screen carefully, you can see that the forceps is there itself. It is my left hand which is moving away and the plunger is moving away. This is important to prevent damage to the lens. And then it is interlocked in place. A little bit of extra viscoelastic is put into it, methyl cellulose that is, and we are ready to go. Paracentesis is done with whatever instrument we are comfortable with, and that should be done before the main entry wound is done. And the chamber is filled with viscoelastic, that is methyl cellulose, not to keep it too tight. Methyl cellulose is the inactive viscoelastic. Hyaluronic acid is the active one, so it is not preferred as it may clot and remain like a putty once the surgery is over. This is definitely safer for us. Yeah. The lens goes in very smoothly, very gently, and once it is in the chamber and we are sure that our direction is correct, where our leading haptic hole is supposed to be, we allow the whole lens to go in through. And if needed, refill the chamber with viscoelastic before we start tapping the haptics in place if it starts coming out. Otherwise, we can just go ahead and see that we tap the haptics in place without touching the optic as far as possible. This step is not that difficult with the ICL. Now with the newer care group lenses in the last year or so, after the central hole lens, etc., has become available, it has become quite easy with the phakic lens from Care Group also. Earlier, it was a much thicker lens, making this procedure a bit difficult with the Care Group lens. Now it is not so. It's equally good and it's equally easy to put it in. No doubt the ICL is much thinner than the lens from the Care Group that is available, but that's not a problem at all nowadays. They are quite easy to put in. Both of them are quite easy to put in. So once these haptics are tucked in, we can start removal of the viscoelastics that we have. Because this procedure is so easy to do and it is so reversible, it is not that difficult to convince the patients to go in for it, because we are confident that we can rectify anything which is needed, and generally the retreatment rates are not that bad. And in case needed, even the removal of the lens is not that difficult because it's a very thin and easy lens to take out. You can see how the flow of the fluid is allowing the viscoelastic to move out from below the lens, and then it can be aspirated through the central hole or through the other holes that we have at the sides and remove the lens. There are a host of complications which are noted. Very rare, I would say. The important two are cataract and glaucoma, which are also avoided with a careful pre-surgery examination. And if we see to it that our sizing is correct. This is how a high vault would look, and this is how a low vault would look. And we don't always need to have an ASOCT to do it. With the help of taking the factor of the corneal thickness into consideration, we can have an idea whether we are okay or we need to do something about it. So when we were talking about complications, this is a patient of mine where there was an issue of the lens rotating. As you can see, it's almost 45 degrees rotated, the lens. 1 second, I'll just start the video of how we do the removal of these lenses. When you see me entering through the main wound, which I'm just reopening the one, you'll be able to make out how much the lens has rotated. The marks show that it's rotated around 45 degrees. That's because of the sizing. It should have been 0, 180. This is a care group lens which I'm taking out. Viscoelastic is put below the lens, and we see to it that we have separated it out properly from the underlying clear lens. And then we proceed with the taking out the haptics from the sulcus, getting it into the anterior chamber, regularly filling up with viscoelastic to protect the endothelium. Again, I avoid using hyaluronic acid because I have to put in another lens again once I have taken this out. So I've got one hole and one part of the haptic out of the main wound. Then I can use a hand-to-hand technique and see to it that I can just pick it up. It folds very easily because it's a thin lens. This is the care group lens, and you can see it is not at all thick, and that is how we can have the lens out. Not at all difficult, that's why it's easily reversible. Doing all this is of a great help because as you can see here, we have a patient who was looking like this prior to surgery, and this is how he is now. His whole life, his whole world has changed, and that is what makes doing all this worthwhile and gives us many very happy patients. So now if I have to directly compare the IPCL with the ICL, if there is a difference in the power range available, there is a difference as I showed you in the loading system of both the lenses. Toric lens alignment in case of the care group is always 0, 180, while here you have to rotate it 10 or 15 degrees as per whatever is needed in case of a toric lens. But the stability of the lens post after placement is fantastic in case of the ICL. It is supposed to have a rotational stability of more than 99%. The central hole is around 380 microns in case of the ICL, and no PI is needed. And it gives us the backup of long-term results of the copolymer which has been used. But the cost factor makes IPCL a very attractive equivalent alternative which we would always want to use in our patients. Thank you so much for being patient and hearing me through this. And if there is anything I need to explain or talk about, I'm here.
Thank you so much, ma'am. That was really a nice talk and a complete overview of both ICL and ICL. There are few questions, ma'am. Which we will take questions after the second talk. Just before going to the next talk, ma'am, one quick question. If given a choice between ICL and ICL, what would you take? ICL or ICL? Without the cost factor. Ma'am,
I
can you
can't
hear
hear
me?
you, Dr. Sumit.
Uh,
Hello,
yeah, Zain,
can you
can you
hear
hear
me?
me?
Yeah. Just repeat it a bit loudly.
Yeah, Neeta ma'am, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
I said thank you for the excellent talk. We will take questions after the Praveen sir's talk. I think we'll move on to the second talk.
Yeah,
Uh,
so Dr. Neeta ma'am, the question which Dr. Sumit was asking was just that if cost is taken out of the equation, then between IPCL and ICL, which would be your preferred choice?
At the moment, I would prefer the ICL because the way it goes into the eye stays in the eye, and because I have the backup of so many years of use by so many people, it would keep me safe and be more confident about the lens in the eye for many more years.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
yes.
That was a very
So now we will move on to the second talk. It's by Dr. Praveen Mehbare sir. He is a very well known in the Vidarbha and the Maharashtra. He is a Nagpur alumni and practicing in Amravati since more than 25 years. He's someone we can say brought the lamella keratoplasty in the region of the Vidarbha and still going on. He is also one of the pioneers of the premium and the PT trials in the region of the Vidarbha and especially Amravati. Raghavan sir was being a president of Vidarbha Ophthalmic Society and he is a very active member of Maharashtra Ophthalmic Society as well. Sir, pleasure to have you here today, sir. And thank you for your time for the Milsa and the webinar. Over to you, sir, for your talk on Indian PT.
Okay, thank you, Sumit. Thank you for the kind word. Uh, I'm an organizer right now. Yeah, I'm sharing my screen now, right? So, at the outset, I would like to thank Dr. Neeraj, Dr. Zain, Dr. Sumit for giving me the opportunity. And am I audible and my screen is clear?
Yes, sir, you're audible. Screen is not full screen, sir. Yes.
Screen, okay. I'm just making it full screen.
Yes.
Is it now?
Yes, sir. Yes. Sir.
Okay, okay. So actually, Dr. Neeta has covered the maximum thing about the phakic IOL, the indications and the contraindications. So I will skip my few slides, the indications and contraindications. And you all know that there are two types of phakic IOL which are used now. One are iris supported and a posterior chamber phakic lenses. The most common thing in posterior chamber phakic IOL are a Vision ICL, IPCL, Biotech phakic IOL lenses, and Appaswamy phakic lenses. As you all know, the advantages of posterior chamber phakic lenses, they are far from the endothelium and achieve excellent cosmesis. And the most important thing, it is a completely reversible procedure. Being it is close to the nodal point of the eye, it gives excellent vision and it doesn't alter the shape or remove tissue as in LASIK where you do the ablation procedure. Your cornea becomes thin. And whenever you are planning to do a refractive procedure like a phakic IOL, these are the things which we need to do. A subjective refraction, keratometry, ACD, Paki, axial length, and white to white. Out of these six, the subjective refraction, ACD, and white to white are the most important thing before going for the phakic lenses. Now you have to be very sure about your refraction. I always do a cycloplegic refraction in all of my patients. And if the patient is wearing a contact lens, it is mandatory to discontinue the contact lens at least 1 week before the measurements and for the soft one and 1 month for the RGP one. Now when you plan the phakic lenses, there are a lot of issues which are happening with the beginner surgeon, and this is basically because of the sizing issue. Now what with the phakic lenses, what we are doing is we are putting a lens in the ciliary sulcus, and if you measure the ciliary sulcus, sulcus to sulcus diameter with the UBM, it may yield the better result. But the present UBM machines may have the lot of variability in their measurements. So the machines are not still ready to give us a very accurate STS measurement. So what we do now is we do a white to white or angle to angle measurement, and then you predict the sulcus to sulcus. Though there is a linear correlation between the white to white and angle to angle, but the relationship may not be constant. So here we can have the predictability issues with the sizing. And as the anterior chamber depth increases, the sulcal diameter also increases. So most of the nomogram are based on white to white and ACD. If the ACD is more than 3.5, you will get a more sulcus to sulcus and more size of lens. And our aim is to have a post of walt around 500 micron. Now, when you talk about the anterior chamber depth, at least 2.8 millimeter of internal ACD is advisable to have when you are planning to go for these lenses. And you can measure the anterior chamber depth with different instruments like IL Master, anterior segment OCT, or ultrasound. So every instrument have some variability. So there was a beautiful study based on the 100 eyes data. The researcher have found that the A-scan reading is compared with the ASOCT and ILMaster 700. ILMaster 500 gives a slightly more ACD. And Lenstar and Pentacam also gives a slightly more ACD as compared to the A-scan and ASOCT. So if you want to rely on one of the instrument, then A-scan will be the choice of instrument, or if you have IL Master 700, that also yields a very good anti-H chamber depth measurement. The main issue for the beginner is measuring white to white. So there are basically two methods. One is manual method and another is automated method. With the manual method, which is more popular, and most of the surgeon uses a digital caliper to measure the white to white. The issue is slight customization. Some surgeon measure from mid limbus to mid limbus, some measures only clear cornea, few measures from outer limbus to outer limbus. So initial days of your phakic IOL practice, you may have the surprise with the vault. Okay. Now, how I do it, the measurement of white to white, I do usually under the microscope in the operation theater. I put a xylocaine eye drop, put a paracare, and apply the speculum. And I don't measure the mid limbus to mid limbus directly with the digital caliper, because the teeth of the digital caliper are quite broad and may be difficult to handle while measuring on the patient's eye. So what I do is I measure with the regular caliper, and after measuring mid limbus to mid limbus, I put ink on that and put an impression on paper, and then again realign it, remeasure. I take 3 measurement and I put 3 impressions on a simple paper, as in on the right upper side, and I that measure that 2 impression, the distance between 2 impressions by a digital caliper, and put down the reading. Like in this case, in right eye, one reading is 11.23, another is 11.32, third is 11.42. I average it and the reading is now 11.323. Now, the average reading, I usually collaborate with my eye trace, and if it is okay, then I go ahead to order the lens. So that's how I measure the white to white. And if you have a different machine for the white to white, already Dr. Neeta madam told that the IL Master gives you a more white to white as compared to the digital caliper and OpScan. So the digital caliper and OpScan is considered to be more precise than the Pentacam or IL Master 500 or OCT. The another concept which I've come up with is a crystalline lens rise. So what is basically crystalline lens rise is the distance between the line joining the iridocorneal angles and anterior pole of the crystalline lens, as shown in this figure. The significance of crystalline lens rise has not been proved with the posterior chamber phakic lenses. But with the artisan iris clip lenses, if your crystalline lens rise is more than 600 micron, the chances of iris chaffing and pigment dispersion are much more. So basically, being in a smaller place like Amravati, people are not paying very much, so we were used to do some ICL, but now we have totally shifted with the Biotech phakic lenses and the Care Group IPCL. So these both type of lenses essentially are very good lenses. I'm getting a very good result with both the lenses. There are few differences between the two lenses. Both lenses, the newer version, have the central hole. The size of the central hole in IPCL is around 380, and in Biotech it is around 326. In IPCL lenses, there are additional 4 holes on the optic and 4 holes on the haptic and 2 holes on the optic, while the Biotech phakic lenses have 2 holes on the optic. So as against with the IPCL, our Indian lenses have the hole on the leading left and trailing right in both IPCL and phakic lenses. The optic diameter can be customized up to 6.6 to 7.6 with Care Group IPCL as compared to the Biotech, and the overall length choice is available more with the IPCL. They have a 0.25 millimeter step from 11 to 14 as against a 0.5 millimeter step of Biotech from 12 to 13.5. And the diopteric range is also slightly more with the IPCL. They make a lenses from plus 15 to minus 30, and they can make a customized lenses even when you have an odd eye like a very small anti-H, the white to white. No, essentially, when you plan to do the surgery, when you give the data to the the biotech people, they give the sheet about the calculation. So I'm just going to show you the example of patient in which I have done biotech phakic lens. The patient was having a refraction of minus 10.5 sphere and minus 2 cylinder 90°. So it converted to minus 13 sphere and plus 1.5 cylinder at 180° of the lens, and they just give the orientation diagram. And this is the video of IPC, the biotech lens which I am implanting. So essentially, I would like to put a irrigating solution with some amount of visco, so that there should not be much cohesiveness in that cartridge. I usually inspect the lens under the microscope, put some irrigating solution, keep a lens in the cartridge. You need to handle the lens very carefully. Don't touch the optic. Just depress the optics in that reach, close the wings of the cartridge, make sure that you're not engaging any part of the lens in the wings. I would like to nudge the lens slightly and make it very sure that it is freely mobile in the cartridge. So the surgery usually starts with taking 2 side port incision and intracameral xylocaine. So you have to be very sure that you don't touch the lens and you use a very sharp blade. But if you touch the lens, that finishes your surgery there only. You have to take out the cataract. I would like to use a methyl cellulose. Don't overfill the anterior chamber. Just drop when the strings are just started to cross. Don't overfill. And make sure that you take a proper sized clear cornea or main incision. You cannot do an implantation, a wound assisted implantation in this patient. Make sure that your cartridge tip is inside the anterior chamber. So I usually like to put a visco again after making my incision. My incision is around 2.8 to 3 millimeter. And this is a biotech phakic toric lens. Usually I go very slowly and make sure that you have negotiated the whole incision. Inject the lens very slowly. Inspect and keep an eye on the hole on the left haptic so that you know that you are injecting it properly, and implant the lens totally into the anterior chamber. I would like to put the visco on the top of the lens, and the tucking of the haptic after implanting the lens on the iris is not very easy or not very difficult. So that tucking can be done with various type of tuckers which are available. So after tucking the 4 haptics, now the next thing is you need to orient the axis to your 180° mark. And after orientation, it is advisable to take out all the viscoelastic from the anterior chamber to avoid the inflammation and post-op intraocular pressure rise. If you leave some amount of viscoelastic behind the lens, then it can cause an inflammatory reaction, inflammatory membrane, and it can cause a lot of issues. So my post-operatively, I would like to check my intraocular pressure and ward. Ideal ward should be around 500. And as everybody, the ward will decrease with the time. And if you have a very high ward, you need to observe, check the angles and intraocular pressure, because there are chances for angle closure. If low ward is there, there are chances for cataract or rotation in phakic lenses. Now, if your intraocular pressure is more than 24, you have to be very vigorous treating this intraocular pressure. As Dr. Neeta Madam already covered about the complications, I just would like to share one of my complications of the phakic lens, in which I had a cataract after 4 to 5 years. So this patient enjoyed a good vision. She was around 35 years old female patient, and she had a good vision after surgery, but her ward was less. And this is the V1 type of IPCL injury. There was no central hole. We have given her the option of explanting the phakic lens, but the patient was not willing to do. and she enjoyed a good vision for 5 years. After 5 years, she presented with a significant amount of cataract. Now here the idea is to put a visco on the top of the lens and in between the crystalline lens and the IPC. So here I'm taking the incision of only 2.6 millimeter. I'm trying to take out the lens axis from the sulcus into the anterior chamber. It's not a very difficult thing. Even if you have a complication like a cataract, in these patients we can solve it very easy. The intraocular lens power calculation in this situation is not different, and we have to do a routine power calculation. After taking out the lens haptic from the sulcus into the anterior chamber, the next step is to wrap the lens with a really good force. And these were the first generation lenses. These were the slightly thicker lenses, so it's slightly difficult to take out. So I'm grasping and re-grasping with the leaf forceps, but I can easily explant to the 2.6 millimeter incision. In the maneuver, my pupil gone down, but being we are a very now everybody does a good phacosurgery, managing a cataract in this situation is not a very difficult job. After doing the good calculations, a phaco is a simple procedure. We can implant the appropriate lens at the end of the surgery. So managing a cataract complication in the IPCL or any phakic lenses is not a very difficult job. And the incidence of cataract after posterior chamber phakic lenses, which is available in the literature, is around 8 to 9%. So this was the one of the initial few cases where I did the IPC. The patient, the lens was not having the move. So, but the patient at the end of the day, patient was happy. So we have implanted many acrylic phakic lenses, and this is the multi-center study in which we have studied 120 eyes, and the spherical equivalent corrected was from -6 to 23. We have a very beautiful result from 86 or 88% of the patients were between plus 0.5 to -1, which every patient had a good post-operative vision as compared to the pre-operative vision. In acrylic phakic toric lens, as an ICL, we may have to move 15-degree clockwise or counterclockwise. In IPCL, we don't have to do that. Every patient has a very good astigmatic outcome. Also, the lens's rotational stability was excellent. So this is a very good lens, and I would like, now I'm very confident, and I usually implant the both lenses, the phakic, biotech phakic, and the IPCL code. That finishes my presentation. If you have any questions, then we are here to discuss. Hello.
Thank you so much, sir. That was really elaborative talk, and especially the video of lens implantation and the cataract surgery. It's, now we have a few questions over here. Sir, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Yeah, sir, you can stop sharing the screen now.
Yeah, actually, I'm just trying to sharing. I don't know.
Is it okay if we take questions for 5 to 10 minutes and then switch to the Tanvi's talk?
Right. No problem.
Okay. So the questions are both for Neeta ma'am and Praveen sir. The few ma'am already have answered in the chat box. There is a question from Dr. Ravish. Considering the more thickness of the IPCL, any precautions we need to take as compared to the ICL?
Hello.
Yeah, I think she lost the connection. Neeta ma'am?
Connect. Okay.
Yeah,
So
Praveen,
I answer. Actually, the thickness of IPCL is not much nowadays. The range is between 80 to 100 micron.
Okay.
And the ICL is very thin in the center. It is slightly thicker in the periphery, but I don't have much experience of ICL. I usually like very easy implant or in very easy loading and holding of our lenses as compared to the ICL, though I don't have much experience with the ICL. So it's not a very thick lens. The newer V2 lens and the biotech lenses are not very thicker lens. It's around 80 to 100 micron, both lenses. I think the biotech has thickness of around 100 to 120, depending on the power. Geeta madam is back now.
Yeah. Neeta ma'am, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, there is one question which is of importance to everyone. Like what is the post of follow-up and the regimen that you do in your peaky IOL patients?
So it is, can you hear me, Sumit?
Yes, ma'am,
Am
very
I?
well.
Yeah, so it is very important not to forget about the patients post-operatively because we have put an external device in the eye and we need to keep a watch out on these patients from the glaucoma point of view and from the point of view of them developing cataract. Generally, the fear initially that we all had when we started putting phakic in lenses was cataract. I lost my fear when I spoke to a patient who had been implanted elsewhere some 7, 8 years back and came to me with cataract. And I asked him, how do you feel about it? We'll be removing that lens and doing the surgery. And what he told me was that I have never seen the world like what I saw in the last 7, 8 years. So I have no regrets for having gone through the procedure. So we should go in with the belief that we are going to give them a better life than they had before. And definitely see that we follow them up so that if there is anything developing, it is we who are keeping a watch on them. So I do a quarterly follow up for the first year, and after that, we do an annual follow up on these patients.
And steroid regimen, ma'am, it's for 1 month or let's say
So I use only Lotepred in these patients and use it for around a couple of weeks only. Being high myopes, there is a very high chance of them being steroid responders. And I don't want anything to add on to the risk of glaucoma that is always there in the back of our mind when we put in a phakic lens, even with a good ACD, when till we are very sure that they are fine. So the follow-ups for the first month would be twice a week in the first week and then every week for the first month.
okay. Any different regimen by you, Dr. Praveen?
I usually follow up my patient on the first post-op day, then seventh post-op day, then after 1 month, and then after 6 months, and then every yearly. Usually, my post-op medical eye drops are like a cataract. I put a Stratford acetate for 3 weeks, 3 to 1, tapering once every week, and I continue with the NSAID for around 1.5 months, and one lubricating eye drop for 1.5 months.
Okay. Then how much do you wait between two eyes? Like after operating one eye, when do you expect wall to be stabilized and then plan your other eye in the other eye?
So on the post-op second day or post-op first day, I look at the wall. If the wall is good, if it is around 500 micron, when I'm okay that I have achieved the sweet spot, then I usually do the surgery after 7 days, the second eye. But if the patient is in hurry, I might do early after 3 or 4 days. But if I have any surprise in the first eye, if I have a low volt around say 300 micron or 250 micron, if I have volt around 700 micron, then I usually adjust and reorder the lens, and it takes around 7 8 days for the second eye. But in usually 80 to 90% of the cases, I am around 500 micron. But any volt around 250 to 70 750 is okay.
Same with you, ma'am?
No, I would do the same thing. It would be depending upon how the patient is in the first 48 hours post-op. If I have any doubts, I would wait for a week and reevaluate before I order again or proceed with the second lens. If I'm comfortable, 5 to 7 days is the period I would look at doing the second eye.
Okay. But have you noticed any significant change between your first day post-op and the 1 week post-op vault?
I have
Like,
not. I have not.
there is a question Dr. Jay Goyal want to ask. Dr. Jay, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, ma'am. Morning, ma'am.
Hi. Hi, Jai. How are you?
Absolutely, absolutely fine, ma'am. Ma'am, I had a question. Now, Star has been promoting ICL as alternative LASIK as a very safe procedure, as to this and that, but we know it is an intraocular procedure and there are risks which are there. But my question was, when there is a borderline LASIK patient who can do well, I mean where you are confused whether you should do a ICL or a LASIK, what would be your choice?
So, there I would take in the situation of the dry eye status of the patient before I take a final call. So, I had one patient where I did phakic lens even with the -5 diopter because the patient was not fit for LASIK but was fit for PRK. But I was not happy with the epithelium and the surface. And she was a girl who was on the system 13 hours a day
Right,
almost.
right,
So there I opted
right.
for a phakic lens instead of going in for a PRK. But if we
Okay,
ask about LASIK and with the powers and everything else being conducive to doing a LASIK, I would do a LASIK.
okay. So you would still think that it is not worth the risk with an ICL if a LASIK is we can do it. I mean, uh,
Yes, yes. That's my personal view because we don't see that many complaints from patients post laser vision correction. With
right, right.
Contura, even the halos around the light, etc., almost zero now. So if a patient is fit for LASIK and I'm getting a PTA which is very good, I would definitely opt for doing a laser vision correction rather than implanting something in the eye and doing an intraocular surgery.
All right. Okay. Thanks a lot, ma'am.
Welcome.
I think we can move on to the third talk for the day. Is it okay, ma'am, sir?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
So the today's third talk is by Dr. Tanvi Hajipurkar. She is a alumni from DY Patil. She is also one of the active member of our MIRSAM. She finished her MS from the Pravara Medical College and her cataract and refractive fellowship from the Netradama and of course Lakshmi Eye Institute. At present, she is a consultant at Lakshmi Eye Institute. And over to you, Dr. Tanvi, for your talk and interactive cases. You can unmute yourself.
Yeah, sorry about that. I'm just trying to share my presentation. Is it visible?
Yes, it is visible.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy and honored that we have very experienced teachers amongst us because these are some of the cases that I have faced recently. With the happiness with which ma'am said that you should go ahead because the patients really do have a change in their entire lifestyle. I did start very aggressively with the phakic lens practice, and then I landed up with a lot of challenges after challenge because one would assume that if you measure everything fine, everything is average, and you go ahead and implant a phakic lens, everything should ideally be all right or in the normal range, right? But I think phakic lens does take us onto an uncharted path. This basically, my talk is going to be a very interactive one, because I want a lot of advice and tips from our teachers here. There are some things which are not done routinely for ICL or even any kind of other phakic lens. Sir and Madam both have discussed about the first impediment that takes over when we do phakic lens practice is the lens size. I believe that even though there are many articles that state that they only take the measurement from an orb scan, which is obviously more accurate than a lens star or an IOL master, but most of us may not have these machines, so we do resort to doing it once with the IOL master or a lens star and then with a digital measurement. Because the digital measurement is very subjective, I feel that it lines us up in the issues that normally do happen. Then will be some discussion whether we should be taking the STS or the angle measurement, like sir had mentioned. Then, like ma'am said, that she did a surgery in a vault less, I mean, anterior chamber less than 2.8. Can we do that? What would be the cutoff for such patients? That's what we will discuss. And then what will we do when we get some unexpected vaults post-operatively? Another question would be, would you do a phakic lens implant in a hyperopic patient? We would love to hear some surgical tips from our teachers about implanting in a non-dilating pupil, because that's a case I recently faced. Both the eyes, not just the single one. Maybe I thought that I hadn't dilated it well, but even in the other eye, the pupil just didn't dilate after an hour of dilatation procedure. Then I think both our teachers have let us know that their preferred material is methyl cellulose. But I believe there is a study done which says that hyaluronate comes out faster, goes in faster. But I understand the reason why our teachers have chosen to use the methyl cellulose. But I'm very keen to know, do we use pilocarpine as well? The next thing we'll discuss is phakic lens for piggyback surgeries, or do you use it in keratoconus as well? So let me begin with my first challenge that I faced a month and a half. That patient is still due for her month visit. She was a 24-year-old female with a refractive error of minus 6.5 with minus 1.5 diopter cylinder at 15 in the right eye, and minus 6 sphere with minus 1 cylinder at 170 in her left eye. Her Ks were quite flat, and she being young, her Paki was adequate, but I was not really keen on doing a laser vision correction. Her anterior chamber depth was good, 2.97 in the right eye, 2.88 in the left eye. So she was planned for a phakic lens implant, which was by Biotech. So the Biotech lens was planned to be implanted. Her white to white by Lenstar was 11.9, and by the digital marker it was 11.3. So the correlation seemed to be similar. So I implanted a toric phakic lens in the right eye, and this is what happened on the first post-op day. It was rotated exactly by 90 degrees. It was supposed to be kept at around 10 degrees, and when I saw her, it was almost 85 or 90 degrees in its place. And this was her vault on the first post-op day, which is, I would say, fairly all right. The white to white was repeated. I felt that why should the lens rotate spontaneously on its own? I assumed that it may be because of a small size lens that was put. To be on a safer side, I also got the white to white digitally measured by a senior surgeon, probably realizing maybe I may be underestimating or overestimating. So, am I heard? So, in view of this low vault and the spontaneous rotation, we obviously operated the other eye after 3 days, but we decided to put a larger size lens in the other eye, because even that was toric. If it was not toric, I would have probably just left it because the vault was fairly all right. But because this was toric, the other eye as well, I didn't want to take a chance. So we put a larger lens. And then you can imagine my horror, when I see her on the first post-op day of the other eye, she had anterior subcapsular opacities. She came with the complaints that I have very hazy vision, it's all muddy looking. And when I see there's almost a 360-degree anterior subcapsular cataract, it was horrific to look at on the first day. She had a small central area which was clear, but it was still, my heart was in my foot. This is what was seen after 4 days. So this is a very, very better picture to look at. When I saw on the first day, obviously probably it was fresh, everything was swollen up, the anterior capsule looked much worse than this. This is the anterior subcapsular cataract opacities after 4 days of implant in the left eye. So you can see a central area which is clear. And so fortunately, she had very good vision. So that eye became her good eye. She was 6.6 in that eye at day 4. But her right eye, where the toric lens had rotated, it was poor vision, 6.12, with a residual of almost minus 4 cylinder, because it had shifted the axis. And in this eye, fortunately, because we had put a larger size, the lens stayed in its place. So it was horizontal. The toricity was corrected well. Now the right eye, these are the sequential vaults which we saw. So at a difference of 4 days, and then finally at almost a month's visit, the last vault is around 207, which I would say is all right. This was her left eye where she developed the anterior subcapsular cataracts. Now, the first wall day, it was very low, surprisingly, 85. Now, the only difference between the two eyes surgically that I did was because I had a rotation in the first eye. For some reason, I felt if I put pilocarpine, there still the lens would probably go well and sit back into the sulcus. So I had put pilocarpine in this eye. Maybe because of that, the walls or the iris pushed the lens back. I don't know. Our teachers can maybe give me a better, understanding of that. But this was a vault on the first day. But eventually, it did increase, and it was around 315 towards the end. Now, something to note special about this patient. Now, she was a very tall girl, probably something I should have thought of or did something differently. She was 6'3". Now, the correlation that we assume that the STS will be so much amount more than the, white to white would be so much less than the STS may not be for her. Her physiognomy was different. She was very tall. Maybe her anatomy was different. So the next question comes that if I would have gone ahead and done her UBM, if I would have got her STS, how would that have helped? I get a measurement, but all the companies that make the IOLs make it depending on the white to white. So I asked the manufacturer that, okay, if I give you, this I did even before I operated the left eye because I thought, maybe that will give me a better result. They said, even if you give us an STS, madam, we won't be able to give you the lens according to the size. So I would have had to give him a white to white. And I also can't explain why was there a variation in the vault height over time. In the right eye, there wasn't so much, but in the left, there was such a low vault initially, or did the lens touch the crystalline lens because of which the cataract came up? And did my use of pilocarpine cause any problems in this case? At this point, I just want to open up the discussion so that we can have all our experienced teachers give us some point of view. I'm going to stop sharing so we can.
So, Tanvi,
Yes, ma'am.
very nicely shared case. Well done. I would like to share with you that when I started phakic lenses, I used pilocarpine. And I had a patient who had lesions which looked exactly like yours, and I had shivers up my spine. And like you, in a week or 10 days, it cleared up. So it is basically the pilocar which pushes the lens back onto the anterior capsule, and also the ciliary body changes caused by pilocar makes it appose, causing, I feel, a temporary edema or a bit of a lenticular swelling,
Hypoxia,
which
sorry.
reduces over a period of time. And after that, I've never used pilocar.
Okay. Okay.
So this
So
happened
the
to me once.
can also be because of that, is what you the
Absolutely,
explanation.
absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. Means it's because you've recorded it so well that you could show the changes involved. Otherwise, you've gone larger. There was no
Yeah,
reason for the vault to be
absolutely.
less. If it was
Absolutely.
the
That's
first case,
why.
yeah, if it was the first case which rotated, everything that you say would be expected, but not for your second case for sure. Then your other question, whether you should have gone for the STS. I would do the STS, especially when this happened in the first eye, and then we retrospectively look at the whole patient more microscopically and see that she's tall, etc. Even if that data is not being used, if you do it in both the eyes and you know what you have put in the right eye, it would help you in judging whether what you had planned is going way off, whether her STS is something unusual, and it may not be used for measurement of the lens which is given, but it would give you a good idea about what is happening inside. So I would definitely want to do an STS when the whole patient is not like a normal patient and the first eye has not done so well.
So I have
For
asked
my
her to
knowledge.
come. She will have done. But another thing I wanted to know is that I will probably the linear correlation isn't so. We'll know that. But now for
Yes.
the eye which is rotated,
Yeah.
I'm afraid that if I put it in, I will obviously not use pilocarpine, but will it stay in place? Because this has stayed in place and it has given me, I can understand that, it has worked in that eye. But
So since you have one eye which is good, I would go and do the STS and see what I've ordered, see whether I'm having similar thing in the other eye, and then it gives me a little bit more confidence in what is being ordered for the first eye before you redo the surgery.
Yeah, and the other thing to note in this patient is now the initial, like at 1 week, her post-operative residual was around minus 4.5 cylinder, and now it is just 2.25 cylinder. So with both eyes open, she's fairly okay. She's managing well. So now I'm actually considering doing a PRK for the cylinder, not even touching the phakic lens, because to take it out and but another question that comes in my mind is probably if it was a star ICL, do you think the cataracts would have come because of its biocompatibility or the way the lens is made?
So I don't know about the fact. I think the cataract will come when it has to come. But one thing is for sure, this is a material which has been used much longer than the other materials available. So
Star
it
one,
gave
yeah.
us that backup of many more people having used it. And we can presume, but we cannot say that the newer Indian materials that we have are not good. But they are not
Okay.
the same for sure.
Okay.
And
We have a similar case who was operated in 2013. I have not included his images, but over time we've seen his vaults have just kept reducing. Today his vault is 25 and 75, and his crystalline lens is absolutely clear, but he's been implanted with the V4C. So is it to note that that's more a biocompatible material? And because there are centra flows in both, so it's not like there is issue with that. Maybe we can assume that.
So the ICL material that we are using now is maybe the third or the fourth generation. So over the years, they have kept on improving the material. All of them keep certain things to themselves and don't share it with us. I won't say that the materials from the Care Group or from the other company are not good, but this is data of many more years of good biocompatibility to back it up.
Yeah. Okay.
the
I'll
amount
just
of cataract you had on the first post-op day, it remained the same or it decreased with time? Whether it
no,
was
it
an
was
inflammation in the
it
anterior capsule.
decreased a lot, sir. It was completely like it was there was nothing clear in the middle. I could not sleep that night. It was very bad. And her vision was also poor, of course. It was around 6:36. That's how bad it was.
Dr.
But it cleared
Tanvi,
up,
this is not
fortunately.
the capsular opacity. It may be an inflammatory membrane which is lying on the capsule of the lens. If there is opacity in the capsular region, I think it should not change with the time. It should not decrease. It should increase rather. But if
Sir,
there is an
it was
inflammatory,
there was no
yeah,
anterior chamber reaction at all. It was absolutely
so
clear,
even,
even minimal cells. But the
even
anterior
if there is no,
subcapsule,
yeah, even if there is no reaction in the anterior chamber because of the retained viscoelastic in between the lens and crystalline lens, it can form an inflammatory membrane. And if it has decreased in the first 3 or 4 days, it may be an inflammatory membrane that is you are dealing with rather than the anterior subcapsule.
okay.
What I wouldn't call it cataract exactly, Tanvi, because the moment we say cataract, we don't expect it to reverse
Correct.
so
Yeah.
much. What
Maybe just
viscoelastic did you use in that case?
so the second eye I used hyaluronate because the first eye I thought that well, not in this case. Sorry, this was methyl cellulose for both eyes. Both eyes methyl cellulose. Yeah.
Okay. So retained methyl cellulose can also give this type of an appearance and this type of a reaction, especially along with pilocarpy.
I think the difference in the surgery was pilocarp, which is what.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'll just go ahead with the next case. So, like we just discussed, even the lens rise is something which we have to start considering now because we have studies which tell us that there are so many that lens does play a very role. There is still not a defined correlation of when you shouldn't implant or how much of a rise in the lens should cause you to think otherwise. But probably a point to remember, and thanks to this seminar, I realized that I will change my wordings to the patient that they will probably come for a long term follow up because there is going to be a progressive decline in the walls over a long term. And if to begin with the anterior chamber is low, then the lens rise may affect it early on. So they have to keep coming to us is something I'm going to tell my patients. We know already that a minimum of 250 to 750 walls seems to be necessary. This is a study which told us that if an ICL is chosen for the correction of myopia, targeting for the greatest possible postoperative central vaulting is advised to achieve safe and complete vaulting for several years, because obviously the lens rise keeps increasing. Annually, this one study has mentioned it rises by 20 microns. So you must realize that in 10 years, it would be quite a bit. Okay, this is another case that I did 2-3 months back. She was an 18-year-old female, very motivated to get rid of her glasses for her marriage. And this is her refractor. She is a hypero +7 with a -0.5 diopter cylinder. She had amblyopia in the right eye, 624, and +6 with -0.5 cylinder in the left eye. But she was fairly having a good vision in that eye. Her keratometry was 40-43. Central corneal thickness was 520. Obviously, I was not going to go for a laser vision correction. So I just thought, let me think about a phakic lens. And when I had a look at her anterior chamber depths, for all her destiny, it was very good. So we measured her white to white and implanted her with a star ICL. Because this ICL does not have a central hole, we did two YAG PIs preoperatively in both the eyes. This is a vault 1 month post-op, not very high, but because anterior chamber being hyperope, everything, we obviously this was the size and this is what the vault that came to. And the result was that she was a very happy patient. Her vision uncorrected was 618 in the right eye, 69 in the left. IOP was within normal limits. I just wanted to show that although, hyperope, like we may think, oh, will it work or not? But patients who have, I think in this 2.8 would be probably would not be the cutoff for anterior chamber depth, maybe something more than 2.9 or 3. But if it is there and if you put it, I think it will give you a wonderful result. So at this point, I just want to ask our teachers here, what is their experience using a hyperopic lens in patients? Or rather, another question would be that what is the cutoff of anterior chamber depth even in myopic patients, where you might want to go a little lower down, like suppose there's a 2.69 or a 2.72 anterior chamber depth. Would you go ahead and put a hyperopic? Would you go ahead and put a myopic phakic lens?
So as I had said, I would go by the case and the amount of dioptric correction which is needed, and take a look at the angles and see how open they are. And I have done a moderate myope with this case, but if it is a high myope and if the angles are not that good, I would be a little wary about going for anything below 2.8.
2.8. But what would be your angle cutoff? Like, what do you look at and where do you look at the machine, as in?
So I look at the anterior chamber depth on the ILMaster 700 from the endothelium. That is what I look at, but I do look at the pentacam data also. It's not that we just depend on one machine. And only if it is a moderate power would I go below 2.8. Otherwise, I would not. And I would definitely not go below 2.7.
What about the angles, ma'am? Where do you look for the angles and how much is the cutoff for
So
that?
angles, I do a proper gonioscopy and take a look at the angle, and I do not compromise on anything which is not an open angle.
Okay. So the suppose you have an ASOCT, would you measure that and see? I mean, would that be a criteria for measuring
So
the angle?
I do have an ASOCT, but I still am happier looking at the angle all around. Maybe I'm
Okay.
old-fashioned. I like to see it for myself.
But I mean, it is a subjective, like experienced person like you might get it. But for us, an open angle, like I think in some studies they mentioned that 50, if the angle is more than 50 degrees or open, and even 35 in some articles. So how do we know where to? Because it will look like there was 2-3 cases, 2.79. Now that's just sitting there on the border. So
Yeah.
you tend to think, what do you do about these cases?
So these are the cases where if the angle is open, if the lens rise is not that huge, and that is when you can definitely go ahead, because you don't expect it to keep on becoming narrower as time goes on and as the lens rise increases. And also remembering that the myopic lenses that we use are little thicker at the periphery. So how much it is going to push the angle would depend upon what is the dioptric power of the lens we would be using or how much we would be correcting. So keeping all those things in mind, I would take a call when I have a borderline case where I proceed. If there is anything which tells me that this is risky in the long run, but it is still borderline, I may share it with the patient and proceed.
Okay. Okay. So your counseling, of course, makes a difference.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, I'll go ahead. So over here we have taken the more I mean the preferred method of using the viscoelastic. I believe both our teachers would say methyl cellulose. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, actually, I
Okay.
have used methyl cellulose, but I have come across my colleagues' experience of putting a lens under the sodium hyaluronate, and they feel that it can be taken out very easily. So, but
Yes.
I don't have personal experience with that. But many people have started doing the insertion in sodium under sodium.
Okay.
What you
Yeah.
have
So
you used that, Elon? Have you used for the phakic lens sodium hyaluronate?
so are you asking me?
Yes.
Yes,
Neeta
I
madam.
did. Actually, Neeta ma'am uses methyl cellulose, I believe.
Yes, because sodium hyaluronate, even though it comes out very easily, and I love the product, the danger is if it is left behind, which is a microscopic quantity, it is a biologically active product, which methyl cellulose is not. And I am also a little bit careful about not overfilling the chamber, even
Hmm.
when I'm using the methyl cellulose. I don't mind repeated injections, but I don't want to like have a tightly packed chamber when I proceed, because some amount does get retained at the angles, etc., which I don't want with sodium hyaluronate. And I
Hmm.
don't mind if it happens with the methyl cellulose. That is
Hmm.
my only concern.
That's a good point because, as you said, it's biologically active. I mean, it may post-operative reaction might be much more than what you would
Yes.
expect. If you suppose leave a little bit of methyl cellulose. I
Yes.
had to use it in only one
Central
patient.
place with the lens is phakic. With the central hole, it is slightly easy to take out the viscoelastic from behind the
Yes.
lens. With the
Yeah.
newer
Yes,
generation orthopedic lenses, that was really a issue, and some amount of
Yes.
visco used there behind the lens.
yes.
Yes. Yes.
The only time I have used sodium hyaluronate was the other eye of a patient whose pupil did not dilate well, and there was no way that I was able to get the haptics in. So that was probably just it. I felt that it might help me put the iris back, but I didn't. I thought this was more difficult for me to wash than the methyl cellulose. So that's with that. I'll go to the next question. Is that how do you what do you do with patients who don't have a very good dilated pupil? Like, have you faced any issues and how to deal with them?
I have not faced a patient where the pupil is not dilated, but I have an issue of tucking the iris when a very large dilated pupil. And when the pupil is very dilated, very big, so you may not be able to see whether you have tucked your haptic in behind the iris or not. But I don't have personal experience with the mid dilated or non dilated pupil. Maybe Dr. Neeta has some experience with that.
So even I have not had an experience of a pupil which is not dilating adequately. It may be slightly less, slightly more, but I've not had very small pupils. Yes, they do become small during the course of the surgery while you keep on tucking it below the iris, and there is a little bit of handling at the iris level, and maybe when you're rotating it in a toric lens, which makes the pupil small later on, and you may have to retract the iris a bit to see that your toric marks are in place, but I have not had that problem.
Okay. Okay. This was, I mean, would you use an intracameral arbitrate would be the only other thing you would want to use if at all it does come down?
Yes, phenocaine is which is available now. It is a very good dilating
Yes.
drug,
Yeah, yeah.
and
It's a
which
combination of tropic
yeah,
formate. Yeah, yeah. Okay.
phenocaine, and maybe in that particular situation you can try using a high viscosity visco to dilate the pupil. Yeah, that may be the situation where we'd like to do the
Hmm.
high viscosity.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Would you by any chance go a small lens smaller in size? Because the patient that I did, I felt like the vault was literally, I mean, while trying to tuck it in, the lens was touching the cornea. So I was thinking, is it a very big size lens? Because you couldn't
No.
get the haptic down under the iris at all. It was that smaller. I don't know. I mean, it's obviously it will give you a low vault because now his post-operative vaults are around 850. So if I have to think in that sense, it made me feel that okay, did it really matter? Okay, we'll go ahead to the next. So how much hydro is enough? Would you say? I mean, I think just to make sure that there isn't any visible viscoelastic. Is that what you look at the endpoint?
Yes.
Okay. Have you ever used a phakic lens, piggyback lens, as in terms of dioptics or even a pseudophakic, residual refractive error?
I have not used any.
Okay.
These
Your
lenses can be
preferred
used
choice
as
is Psychoflex.
these lenses can be used as a piggyback lenses, no doubt about that. But with now the IPC or the KRO people have these special piggyback lenses. So
Yeah,
you will not
Sulcoflex.
see a Sulcoflex. So there that are four optic lenses,
Hmm.
lenses, and I have used few that piggyback lenses, and they are working very well. But
Okay.
personally speaking, I have not never used these lenses as a piggyback.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay. And in keratoconus patients, any experience with those? Especially because their case would be very steep and that may give us a false anterior chamber value. So how do we assess whether, what we are putting, is it in, I mean, are there any things that you look at especially in these cases?
Dr. Neeta, ma'am, can you answer that?
I have done only one case of keratoconus, and that patient had a very, very deep chamber, and I had taken a special care to get the UBM done to see what it is at the periphery also in the area away from the cone. And she had a lot of myopia, so that case was very classical. But if it is a case where there is just a cylinder, it is going to be difficult to judge, and I would take the help of the UBM, take the help of the lens rise, etc., to be able to take a decision about what I do when I proceed with such cases.
So for a routine case, do you still look at lens rise, or of course not the STS, I assume, because of the UBM?
No, I have not been doing it for routine cases, but I think I would be doing it in future because there are more and more studies which say that we should take a look at it, even if we are doing a posterior chamber lens. It was earlier considered to be more important in the iris fixated lenses, etc. But now I think that it has a huge role to play here. And maybe the case that you had and all those type of surprises can be
Outliers.
prevented if we look at it.
Correct.
It
So
is always a good idea to do a UBM in each and every case if you have the access to. Even if you don't have any nomogram which are available till date, but it will rule out this some sulcus problem like a cyst or something like that. And
yeah.
it is a high time now the industry people should come with a very good nomogram based on the sulcus to sulcus. And I have advised them that basically they should provide the UBM microscopy even if the surgeon doesn't have. They can have a mobile UBM and they can give to the surgeon to measure the UBM, and they should study their lenses how it works with the different sulcus diameter with different UBM machine.
In fact, the STS Compact, Compact is the company that makes the UBM. It's very portable, and the best part about that UBM is it has an ICL vault simulator. So we had a
Okay.
study when I was doing my fellowship where you would, measure every eye, and the machine would tell you that this is the 13.2 or 13.7 would be the size. If you use this, this is the amount of vault that you will get. If this is being used, this is the vault you will get. So, I mean, this was like what, 6 years back, but I'm assuming a lot of studies will come up with that vault simulator. And if it works well, I think it will be a boon for most surgeons. You can even understand how much vault you would get. So, if it's a little bit lower, you would want to go for a higher size. So, I think that's again something to do in the future.
We did work. I think there are many factors apart from the sulcus diameter for the wall. The compression factors, anatomical difference, the rigidity, plasticity of the tissue around it may induce the size of the wall. So when you did that study, did it work in your case?
So we just found whether there was a correlation or not, and this was post-operative progressive. They saw that it's not very consistent, but it is not giving us like we chose. The study was that we chose what the company told us the size for that. We were just wanting to see that if the for 13.2, what was the simulators telling us as the the wall that would come, and that came pretty well, precisely within that range. But of course, the range was very high, 250 to 750. But for that, thing to be applied as a nomogram, you would need a lot many more cases. So I guess they're still working on that. But the initial results that we got were that the simulator was quite predictable in giving us the amount that what it said was the vault was what we got post operatively as well. So I think to end my talk, I would just like to give some messages for a beginner like me. I think we have to choose our cases wisely. That outlier or a 6'3" patient was something that I have obviously done after I've done a couple of implants, but it would still give me a big stress point in my life. It would not have. I mean, couldn't have done anything to change it, but it would be wise to choose your cases. Maybe take the help of a senior surgeon to also measure the white to white, so you understand that you are doing it in the correct way. You have to observe how the surgery is done. I think surgical procedure is something is the only place where you may do something differently. So I think see a lot of other surgeons who are doing it, how the lens goes in, how you can avoid an intraoperative complication, that is, and take as many measurements as all of us, all the teachers have said, that measure the angle, look at the STS, look at the lens rise if you have the means to do them, because that is the only way that you can separate the outliers. It may not give you an additional benefit to do your particular case, but it will tell you that okay, this may not be the best patient for you. Dilate the pupil well and counsel the patients about the long term effects. This is something I haven't been doing, but I will now. I will probably mention that maybe in 10 to 12 years, it is possible that we may have to exchange our lens, or maybe something we'll have to do at that time, because you now know that the lens rise continually grows and it may cause a low wart if you are beginning with a low wart initially, and keep a yearly follow up of walls. At this point, I just want to say that although we keep seeing all horrible, or rather discuss all the challenges that we face in phakic lens practice, there are many happy patients too. We don't include them in our cases. Some of them are, like ma'am said, they have their lives changed. So I don't think that should be a hindering point for most of us to operate, because we are beginners, but we can go ahead, and phakic lenses are just like Star, the biotech loading, unloading is so easy. So it is a very easy surgical procedure as well. Thank you so much. Maybe we can take some more questions if there are.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Dr. Tanvi. That was a really nice documentation of the cases and a very good discussion with the panelists and our experts. So there are a few questions. Then, what do you want to do? Like, everyone can, those who want to ask question can unmute themselves and have a direct question discussion with our experts.
Yeah, so that would be better rather than typing the questions. We can just have like a open group discussion on whatever.
Okay. So Dr. Rushita had a question. Rushita, can you unmute yourself now? Uh, she's not there. I will ask her on her behalf. The question from her is, there is a 20-year-old patient with the -10 diopter sphere, -2 diopter cylinder, pachymetry of 480, and ECD internal is 2.77 millimeter. Both are similar with the ASOCT angle 18 to 90 degrees. What will be the choice of surgery?
It is a 2.78. Then look for the angle and we might go for the phakic lens. For 480, we cannot go for the corneal based refractive procedure of -10 and -2, let's say 11 sphere.
ASOCT she has mentioned as 18 to 19 degrees.
18 to 19. So that is
One
one
eight.
case. Okay.
1.8.
1.8. So -10 sphere, -2 cylinder, ACD is 2.78, right?
Yes, yes, sir.
What was the ACD? And the ACD was taken by which equipment, whether by ultrasound or,
That has not been mentioned, sir.
yeah, pardon?
That has not been mentioned in the question.
Okay. So these are a very, very difficult cases. I think 18, 20 degree on ASOCT, you should not go for the phakic lens, and no refractive procedure. So don't do any surgery.
I think it is reasonable enough to tell a patient that nothing will be safe for you and we would prefer not doing anything, rather than wanting to do something or the other. That is what I
Right.
feel, whatever the doctor is comfortable with.
Refractive lens exchange still remains an option, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, but that depends on how much the patient is motivated and how a retina is. But for -10 and -2, refractive lens exchange has its own issues. So it is not very retina friendly. But if your retina colleague tells you that the retina is okay. And many of my patient, if the patient is insisting, but usually they are more than 15 and 16 dioptric power, then I usually do a 360 barrage if they have some retinal thinning in the periphery. My retina colleague does a 360 barrage, and I usually explain them in detail. And again, the choice of lenses in this patient with clear lens extraction is an issue. Because even if you put a monofocal lens, the patient may have to wear the glasses. But you can plan the put a EDOF lens, the new available EDOF lenses, and do some amount of micro monovision patient. But again, it's a proposition which we have to clearly explain to the patient. But if patient is very much insisting, if she has a power of around minus 18, minus 19, if retina colleagues give me the okay thing, then I may go for the clear lens extraction. Yes, but that will be my last choice.
Praveen sir, I had one question for you. Since you are
I
Then
can't
we
hear
can't.
you,
IOCare,
Doctor. Can you repeat the question? And we can't hear
yeah,
you.
yeah. Since you are you implanting both the biotech and the IOCare phakic lenses, so which
Right.
how do you counsel one patient for one and for the other? Because does it make a difference that the IOCare lenses gives you many more lens power options, the size options in 0.25 steps
Ye-
compared to the other? So that is something that I've
Yes.
always wanted to know. Does that dictate your preference?
No, basically, I don't give a choice to the patient. Usually, it's a one I decide which lens to put. And I am very comfortable with the biotech lenses because of the very easy handling and the I have a very consistent vault outcome with the biotech lenses. When I started putting the phakic lenses to begin with, more long back, after 6 to 7 years back, the IPCL doesn't used to have a central hole, and they were very new that time. Now I had two horrible complications of post of glaucoma and cataract. And from that day, actually, I was slightly very afraid of the IPCL, and I stopped taking care surgery for almost 1 or 2 years. And then I started implanting the biotech lenses, and biotech lenses used to give us me a very good wall, and the lenses are very easy to handle, and they can go very easily with the through the cartridge. But recently, again, I started using the IPCL with the new generation lenses. They are more thinner, the more choice is available, the more step sizes are available. Now I use a 50-50% both in biotech as well as IPCL. So if you want to have a basically the if you order the biotech lens, then it may take around 10 to 12 days. But if you order IPCL, I usually get within 7 or 8 days. So that also matters sometimes. Depending on the situation, I usually decide which lens to put. But I'm happy
But
with
does
both of them.
But does it affect you that the IPCL gives you many more sizing options in
Yes.
0.25 steps, or do you leave it to the company, to the industry person to tell you that you implant this particular lens size, or do you override it, or do you feel you have more options with the IPCL?
I used to totally rely on the company people. But when I started using the IPCL around 2 years back, I used to have a high vault in each and every of my case. And I was surprised. Then we talked about with the company people, and what they are giving me now is the one size less than what usually they are advocating to the other surgeon. And in that way, I think every person should have their personalized nomogram, because taking a white to white reading differs with each and every surgeon. And basically some of the times, Sanjay Argal, who is from the IPCL, he used to modify the things, and he used to give me the size of the lens, which is always 0.25 millimeter higher than the what has been advised. And then that time I was using their lenses blindfold. But after that, I started to look into the calculation things, and I'm now have my own customized sort of nomogram, and now I'm happy with the IPC. Yeah. And 0.25 millimeter of the sizing, yes, definitely it makes the difference. So there are a lot of advantages of IPCL. There is no doubt. It is a thinner lens, has more holes, more choice. They give us faster as compared to the
I believe that
Uh,
the biotech phakic lens also, like in that first case that I showed, I had put the largest size in the left eye, 13.7. Now that also gave me pretty low, I won't call it the low walls, but towards the lower side. So I asked them that if the STS comes to be abnormally large, would you make a size larger than 13.7? And I believe they do. So biotech can customize and make you a size larger than 13.7 if you need in some outliers like this. But IPCL, like you are saying, they already make them, is it?
IPCL, I believe, goes up to 13.8 or 13.9, if I'm not mistaken.
IPL from 11 to 14 millimeter in
Yeah.
0.25 millimeter.
Till 14 millimeters. Okay.
Something else for the who uses the anterior segment OCT to manually measure the white to white? Of course, you can't use it for sulcus to sulcus, but I've been using my anterior segment OCT to measure the white to white using the landmarks of anterior segment OCT, and I found it is quite accurate. Comparing it with your manual methods. Anyone having any experience with that?
Actually, I use my eye trace to confirm the reading of the digital caliper. So there is a very beautiful study where it showed that the white to white of ASOCT is slightly bigger than the digital caliper or off scan. So if you have your own nomogram with that white to white, then it is okay. But if you give particularly in writing about the instrument you are using to the white to white, then the company people have the different nomogram for that reading. So the consistency is more with the automated one.
I have a last question that at what point would you explant an ICL or a phakic lens? I mean, if you keep observing and at wall size 25, 30, maybe 75 even, everything is fine. There is no lens opacity is observed. Club IOP is fine. When would you decide to implant or rather explant that lens, or would you not?
Actually, I have a very I have an experience in which the patient has a 1.2 millimeter of wall, that is 1200 micron, and I have given him the choice of explantation, but the patient was not ready, and this is around 4 years back. That patient comes regularly every 6 months to me, and he is very fine. So
Angles out.
surprises are, but by if you go by the book, then any vault more than 1000 or any vault less than 200, the rate sign, and the choice is yours. But basically, if you have a less vault, definitely it makes a sense to explant it. If you have a slightly high vault, then you may observe sometimes. What's your opinion, Neeta ma'am?
I would agree with that. We have to take the patient into confidence. I've not had an incidence like this to be able to tell you, but I would talk to the patient. I would keep on following up the case with the data of the measurements taken. But if it was going flatter and almost touching the lens, I would be more keen to take it out and maybe convince them to take it out. Unless the power is something like minus 18 or minus 20, where taking it out also is giving them a very different
Visible.
experience from what they have right now. And then if they opt to keep it in and they are okay with developing a cataract and doing a cataract surgery, we would have maybe done a clear lens for that patient. Then I would hold on, but otherwise I would take it out if it was going flatter and flatter every time I see the patient.
Thank you so much. This was very enlightening.
So there is one question from Dr. Ajay. If the lens opens in the reverse direction, can you reinsert it or you have to postpone the case?
So if you have not injected the whole lens and if you have noticed it by seeing where the hole is, you will be able to retract it, take it out, reload it and proceed. Generally with the IPCL, I always ask for a backup lens. ICL people don't give it. I ask for a backup lens. Looking at the lens, I would be able to take a call whether I'm going to reload the same lens and do it or put in another one. If it is already injected in the chamber and you notice it, it should be taken out for sure. because it is going to give rise to complications if you have not implanted it correctly. And you can take a call after removing it, whether you can implant the same lens or you're going to wait for a backup and do it another day.
I think he wanted to ask you whether we can flip that lens into the anti-age chamber. That must be the question for him. So,
Um,
is it so, Dr. Ajay?
He is not there, sir.
Okay.
I have done it once. It was
Looking at the-
possible to do it. Yeah, because it was a very high myop patient, chamber was deep, and with the help of viscoelastics, I could do it.
The
Then-
reason why they tell not to do is just to avoid the contact with the anterior capsule. That is the only reason, I think. So if you are sure about your procedure and a very deep anti-age chamber, then maybe I haven't had any time to do that, but I think they have advised you to take out the lens and reinsert. So the message should be clear. It is not advisable to flip into the anti-age chamber. You take out the lens and you reinsert it.
Questions are like you had shown a case where patient developed a cataract and you operated. How did you calculate the IOL power for the patient?
Actually, there is no problem in the IOL power calculation when the phakic IOL is inside. So this is your routine calculation.
Anyone else has any question? You can ask it directly,
Yeah.
or you want to
Dr.
share
Hitesh,
something.
you there? He has made one comment. Dr. Hitesh, can you unmute yourself? Yes, Dr. Hitesh.
Yeah, I have been implanting phakic IOL under irrigation without using any viscoelastic for quite a long time now with consistent results. And it eliminates all the problems with the viscoelastic that we face.
So how do you use the irrigation? Like it's with your IA or
Yeah,
you?
yeah, yeah. Eye probe, yes.
Yeah, Dr. Hitesh, it's a very good method. There is no doubt about that, but you have to be very sure about the implantation and everything. Because in an unforeseen
Yes, yes.
situation, if you are stuck into the capsule, the incision, then it can have a horrific complication. So yes, but definitely if you're very sure about your implantation, then putting under irrigation is definitely solves a lot of issues.
Yes.
Dr. Hitesh, which lens do you implant under irrigation? Is it the ICL?
I have put IPCL, I have put even biotech lens.
So all of them work well with irrigation alone.
Yeah. I have a YouTube video also. You can watch that video also.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Hitesh. Anyone has any experience with the Appasamy lenses, phakic lenses?
I believe Dr. Rushita has experience. If she can unmute herself and share something.
She is not in the meeting presently. I think she had to leave. Then Dr. Mihisha wants to ask. Dr. Mihisha, can you unmute yourself and ask and have a discussion? Dr. Mihisha?
Can you please re-emphasize on how to manually measure the white to white with a caliper? Whether you take the mid limbus or from the clear cornea or from the posterior limbus?
Is this question directed to me?
All the speakers.
Yeah. Actually, I have already elaborated how I take the white to white reading. I usually take mid limbus to mid limbus under the microscope in the operation theater with our regular caliper, because I usually find the digital caliper very bulky, and I may not able to measure the white to horizontal white to white reading properly. So what I do is I usually use a regular caliper After measuring white to white, I put a ink on the tip and I make an impression on the paper. And I again realign the caliper to 0, and again I remeasure. Again apply the ink, put an impression. And this I do 3 times. And I measure the distance between the 2 impression with the help of digital caliper. So it is slightly easier for me. But most of the surgeon are measuring directly with the digital caliper, but the instrument is quite bulky and we may not be able to measure it properly. So that's what I do it. Neeta
I
madam,
do
how
it. I do it exactly the same way, Dr. Praveen. I never put the vernier caliper on the eye. It is the normal caliper which is used. The tip is stained, marked on the paper, 3 readings taken. Then they are taken aside, measured with the vernier caliper, and then average is taken. That's exactly how I do it.
Anyone has any questions to be asked? Because we have asked all the questions which are put in the chat box and which audience wanted to ask. Anyone with any questions? Then Neeraj Sen, I think we can wrap up here. Neeraj, we
Yes.
can't hear.
So, yeah, can you hear me now better?
Yeah, we can hear.
So I think we will conclude the meeting. I think, firstly, I just want to thank Dr. Neeta ma'am, Dr. Praveen sir, and Tanvi ma'am for joining us, and everybody else who joined us on a Sunday morning. And there was so much to learn. I think we're taking back a lot of important points that we should consider for Phakic IOS. Also, a big thank you to Sun Pharma for continuously supporting us in this initiative. And just before we end, we just want to say that we will have these meetings once in a month, the first Sunday of every month. So we will now try to keep it open for everybody outside the group also. So more the merrier. And that's it. We'll end the meet over here. Thank you for joining us again.
Thank you,
And
Neeta
also
ma'am.
you can stop.
Thank you, Sun Pharma.
Ma'am, you have to take a lecture on Contura for us someday, please. Then you make it happen.
Contura
Yeah.
lecture is best taken in my clinic, where I can
Where-
show you everything, where I don't have to, where it is like more hands-on.
we'll
Yeah.
we'll be there. Thank you.
Always
Sure, we
welcome.
plan something.
Yeah. Thank you so much for calling me, and it's a pleasure to interact with all of y'all. It makes me feel younger, and please call me again,
Thank you so
even
much.
if not to talk, to participate in the meeting with y'all.
Thank you.
Definitely.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Have a good
Thank you.
Sunday.
Thank you
Bye.
very much.
Bye bye.
Thank you, sir.